Welcome to our tutorial for our question 9 of our daily review. Question 9 is describing exponents. It says write in standard or exponential form, and exponential form is another way that we describe exponents. And then it asks us to solve those problems. Before I describe what exponents are, how to write in exponential form, what the parts of an exponent are, or even how to solve, I want to take us back to elementary school to remember some things that we've done in the past. So think back and think if you remember maybe when you saw problems in elementary school that looked like this: 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. And at some point, you probably got really frustrated and were like, man, that's so much to write down every single time. Well, luckily, you learned that there is a much more simple and a much more efficient way to write that exact same thing down. Because we have 6 groups of 3, we could write this problem as a multiplication problem that says 3 times 6. And whether or not you chose to solve this problem using repeated addition or you solve this problem using multiplication, you know that the value or the answer is the same. The reason that we talk a little bit about about these problems from the past and what multiplication represents is because exponents have some similarities and also have some differences between what we did when we worked with multiplication. Exponents are a simplified way to write repeated multiplication. So we notice that we are finding a more efficient way to write this repeated form. However, what's different is that we're not working with repeated addition anymore, and we are working with repeated multiplication. And mathematics is oftentimes about finding the most efficient and simplified way to write things down. So let's go ahead and look at the parts of an exponent and then describe how we would solve and work on those types of problems. In the example we're going to use today, we are going to use 3 as our base number. And our base number always tells us what is repeating. So in this example, 3 is going to be the number that's repeating. And notice that 3 is a nice big number. I've written it down nice and big here. My exponent in this problem, in this example today, is going to be 6. And that exponent always tells us how many times do we repeat. And notice that that exponent is small, and it's written in the top right-hand corner. This does not look like 36. It should look different than 36. It should be a large 3 and a small 6 in the top right-hand corner. That's how we can tell the difference between these types of things. So we have our base number, which is 3. That's what's going to repeat. We have our exponent, which is 6. That's how many times it's going to repeat. And when we put both of those things together, we have what's called a power. We put those together, and that is a power. And we would describe this particular number or this particular operation as 3 to the power of 6 or 3 to the 6th power. Either way describes exactly the same thing. Now let's go ahead and take a look at an example of how to actually start working out 3 to the power of 6. So here is 3 to the power of 6, and we've already described that 3 is what repeats and 6 is how many times that it does repeat. But what we have to remember as we start to write and solve these problems is that this is no longer repeated addition, but we are working with repeated multiplication. So this should look like 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Now, we have this written in both exponential form and we have this written in what's called standard form. And sometimes we call that expanded form because it's kind of stretched out and it's written in the long way. So those are the 2 ways that we could write this problem. 3 to the 6th power is being described as 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3. Now let's talk about how we would solve this problem. You obviously could grab a piece of paper and you could start working this out and start multiplying these numbers together. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27, times 3 is 81, etc. And you could continue to do that until you had multiplied 3 by itself 6 different times. However, you're going to notice even in that short example or description that I gave, those numbers are getting really large really quickly. And so although you can do this by pencil and paper and write it down and all of that kind of stuff, you are totally welcome to use a calculator when we are working with exponential problems. So I'm going to go ahead and show us a quick description of how you can use your calculator for exponent problems. Here's a look at the calculator that we have in our classroom. And your calculator might be different, so the button might not be in the same place. However, the button will be the same button. And we're going to identify that button is right there, and that is the button that we would use to show exponents. If you are on a keyboard for your Chromebook or another computer, you need to push Shift and 6. You're going to notice that same little triangle piece right above the 6. So if we were doing this in our calculator, we could go ahead and type in 3 and then to the power of, and that's called a caret 6, and that's equal to 729. So we have our value for this problem now. So now that we've talked about what the parts of an exponent are, how to write it in exponential form and standard form, as well as how to solve, it's really important for us to make sure we identify some common mistakes that get made so that we can avoid making those common mistakes. We absolutely have to remember that 3 to the 6th power is not equal to 3 times 6. It's really important, and a lot of students get confused by this the first few times that we work with exponents. 3 to the 6th power is not equal to 3 times 6. There are some similarities. We are working with repetition. However, we have to remember that our exponents are working with repeated multiplication, and our multiplication is working with repeated addition. So make sure that you remember that. It's a really, really important piece. And we've already solved both of these problems. We know that the value of 3 to the 6th power is 729, and we know that 3 times 6 is 18. And those things obviously don't equal each other. So make sure you don't make those common mistakes. One thing for you to think about, if you're ever not quite sure if you did an exponent problem correctly, is you can use this as an example, and just remember exponent problems get really large really quick, right? 3 to the 6th power was already in the 700s, and 3 times 6 was only 18. So if you have worked out a really big exponential problem and you get kind of a small number, you might want to go back and think about, did I repeat addition or did I repeat multiplication? Because exponents are always working with repeated multiplication. That should give you a pretty good idea of how to work with our exponent problems. Don't hesitate to ask if you have any questions, and good luck as you're moving forward.